All righty. Song? Sandy?
Red book, page 221.
221. Red book. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. All my heart to Him I give, ever to Him I cling. In His blessed presence live, ever His praises sing. Love so mighty and so true merits His soul blessed song. Faithful love and service to Him belong. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above, Jesus completely saved. He will lift you by His love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows us will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me. When nothing else could help, love lifted me. Next. Ron. 110. Same book? 110. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from the world quick, one more hand. Just put your hand up. Wendy.
Near Adonai, 272.
Same book?
Yeah.
272. There's 5 verses to that song. Let me get my pencils ready. Okay. All right, I'm ready. Near my God to thee, nearer to thee, even through thy cross, O God, that risen me. Still all my song shall be near my God to thee, near my God to thee, near to thee. Though like a wanderer, the sun goes down, darkness over me, I rest a stone. Yet in my dream I'll be near my God to thee, near my God to thee, near to thee. There let the way appear, steps unto hell. All that thou seen to me in mercy give. Angels to beckon me near my God to thee, near my God to thee, near to me. Then with my warmth, though bright with thy praise, out of my stony grief, Bethel I raise. So by my woe to be near my God to thee, near my God to thee, near to thee. Or if a joyful ring cleaving the sky, sun, moon, and star forgot, upward I fly. Still all my song shall be near my God to thee, near You know why I have these pencils, don't you? You don't know why I have pencils? Because I lose track of where I'm at. So that's why I said, when you've got 5 verses, I'm up here rolling pencils around. So I remember where I'm at. Is that good?
He carries a pencil in his pocket.
Very professional. That's what you call old school stuff.
All right. Well, good afternoon. It is good to have everyone here. Good to see everyone. In way of announcements, remember ladies' meeting this Wednesday, and then we have Bible. We have business meeting on Wednesday evening. So church members, please become part of that. And then we also have Vacation Bible School. Also, the ladies' retreat is coming up in 2 weeks, right? Yeah. So we want to keep the ladies in our prayers as they will be going to the ladies' retreat this year too. So, any other announcements? All right. If there aren't any others, let's open up with a word of prayer. Brother Corey, would you lead us in a word of prayer? Amen. All right, if you'll open your Bibles to Genesis chapter 4. It's been a few weeks since we've, with Mother's Day and many other things that have happened, we haven't been in Genesis for a little while. But I want to keep going, and we're going to talk a little bit about Cain and Abel. And so we're going to look at those few verses. Well, we're not going to get through the whole chapter. I can tell you that right now. There's going to be, we'll probably take it in 2 stages and consider, first of all, Cain and Abel, and then we'll consider what happens, or we'll consider Cain after his sin and after he addresses what he does with his brother. One of the things, I had a member at Klamath Falls once tell me, I like reading the Bible and I like looking at the different stories, but sometimes it feels like it's a big soap opera. And I go, yeah, I could see that with all the different things and the twists and the turns and things like that. And so all the different, there's different drama and all sorts of things as it goes through, as you go through the Bible. And as you, especially here at the beginning, I think there's a lot of different things that happened, and they're trying to get their bearings and trying to get things figured out. And so, but we'll talk a little bit about Cain and Abel and get going. So let's go ahead and we'll start in let's start with verse 1 through 5. Now, before we get going too far into this, when you look at chapter 3 and we see God has taken Adam and Eve and put them out of the garden, there's a graph that I can bring and I can show you, kind of gives you an idea of how long and the time frame of everything. But there's a significant amount of time that has transpired between chapter 3 and 4. So don't think this is just a day, a year, but there has been some time that has passed through. We have two gentlemen, two brothers, Cain and Abel, that are not boys, they are men. There are some that believe that they have families at this time. I don't really have an opinion on that, but we do know that they're old enough that they have responsibilities. They're not necessarily being dictated by their mother and father, but by Adam and Eve, but they definitely have some responsibilities, and they know they are adults, what we would classify as an adult at this time, I believe. So at this time, we're going to talk a little bit about them and their relationship. So starting with verse 1, it says, "And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have begotten a man from God." Now, I want to stop there for a minute because just one of the things, so this was a question that was proposed to me. Got my heel on the stair. A question that was asked me and thought and given to me. And I'm going to kind of explain this in a broad way, okay? Because as we look at the story of Adam and Eve, as they left, we understand God brought Eve to Adam. We understand at that moment when Adam and Eve came together, we classify as that's the first marriage, okay? When you look at the marriage, it talks about how Adam and Eve became one flesh. And as they became one flesh, there was some relationships that happened because of that marriage. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that for a minute because I think this is, because of the world that we live in, and I don't know who's watching online, but I think this is important, that the definition of marriage is one man and one woman, okay? And I want that's important because that is the biblical and that is what God started it out with, okay? That is what true marriage looks like. A man leaves his mother and father, a woman leaves her mother and father, they come and become one flesh, okay? Now, when we come to verse 1 of Genesis chapter 4, it talks about, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, okay? Now, this was not something new, okay? This was something they did as a married couple, okay? This was a relationship that I believe the Bible is very clear on that only happens in a marriage relationship, okay? This is not to happen outside of a marriage relationship. This is to happen inside a marriage, under a marriage covenant, okay? Now, many will say it's under, legally people will say, well, it's under a license and all that stuff. I get that. I understand we have what's called legal marriages through the state. When I do a marriage, I fill out a license, I turn that in and all that stuff, okay? Before that whole thing, there was no license, okay? There wasn't any such thing as a legal license or anything like that to get married. You came together. There was a ceremony. There was the act, and you were considered a man and wife. Okay, and that is what we see happening. I believe that is what defines a marriage. Okay, I believe that is what defines that relationship. Okay, and so as you. The reason I bring that up is I think that is extremely important, especially in the day that we live, okay? The family is being attacked, and as a family is being attacked, the idea of what marriage is, the idea of what a family looks like is under attack. And I believe that it is that God's God's parameters behind a family is there needs to be a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, and children. And husband is to be the leader of that household. The wife is to, and this whole thing, I think it looks different between families, between each family and what, their defined roles and what that looks like. I know from, I can tell you from the roles from Rachel and I's perspective, have changed throughout the years, okay? There's times where Rachel takes on different things where because of where I'm at, because of some things I'm having to deal with, I take on other things, and so it kind of changes as we grow and as a couple, and sometimes I get, it's different for everybody, okay? I know that every marriage and every family is going to look a little bit different as far as the roles and everything, but there are two roles that should not change. The husband is to be the leader of the house, and the wife is to be the one that is to support the husband and to help him, and really the husband, men, we need to be directing our families to go towards Jesus Christ, okay? That's the ultimate goal, okay? So understanding that is, I think, very important as we look at this, because this really is the definition and where I would go to, if someone was to ask me, what is a marriage? Okay? I'm going to take you to Genesis chapter 2. I'm going to take you to here in Genesis chapter 4, where Adam knew Eve. Only Adam and Eve, okay? And it was within a marriage relationship. It was not outside of one or anything like that. And so that's one of those things I think is very important, okay? The other part of this that I want you to notice is that this institution is built, this institution was established before we even have Israel or even the church, okay? That's how important this is, okay? Many times we talk about how the church is the most important and how that, we need to love Israel, and all those things are important. But what is a church made up of? Families. So if the family isn't functioning, is the church going to be functioning right? No. So we need godly families, godly couples who are going to lead their families, and as they lead their families, they're going to come into the church, and the church is going to flourish because the families are here together, okay? It is, I've seen this my whole life as I've been in church. When God is not part of the family, it's hard. It's harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, okay? I want to make sure you understand that. I've seen people make it work, but those people that I've seen make it work, they will tell you it's not easy. It's hard. But when God is the focal point of the family, it works. And it's proven, okay? So having him as that focal point and coming together as a family to be involved in church, to be involved in the Word of God is vital to be able to be, let's be honest, it brings happiness, right? It brings joy in our life, Rachel and I were ecstatic when Annie accepted Christ as her personal Savior. Those are the things that you look forward to. Those are the things as a dad, as a mom, you are excited about when you see your kids start to take on Jesus on their own and start applying it to their life. And start, it's not just because mom and dad told me I had to go, right? It's because they want it for themselves. And I can tell you that they're starting to prove that junior high and high school, a lot of these kids are starting to make decisions as far as what they're going to do with Christ. Okay? It's no longer college age. They're doing it sooner. So it's important that we make sure and we teach them and we bring them up correctly in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Okay. Now, does anyone have any thoughts or comments? I know I felt I needed to spend some time on that because, like I said, I don't know who's watching online. I know pretty much everyone here. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think that's important for those that may have questions. That is what marriage is about. That is what the family is about. Okay, so it's not what politics say. It's not. I was listening to someone, and I think this is absolutely true. I think we're using Jesus for a political movement, and that's not what he's for. I think Jesus is for people's lives. Okay? And that's what he's for. Okay? And really our families need more of Jesus and not politics. Okay? All right. So let's keep going. Let's go on into the rest of the verse. Verse 1 talks about Adam and Eve, and they conceived and had Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Okay. Verse 2, it says, and she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Okay. So we have two different men, we have two brothers. Adam and Eve at this point have conceived Cain and Abel. Now, I don't really have a lot to prove this with, but this is where I stand. I don't think Cain and Abel were the only kids. Okay? I think there was more than Cain and Abel. Okay? I think that there was a very good chance that there was more than just Cain and Abel. Many people will say, well, there was only the two boys. I feel you're a little naive to think that, okay, because of the relationship. Now, Annie brought out asked me a question, and it's just the way in which things were, is that who did Cain and Abel marry? It was probably their sisters, okay? That was what it was, okay? And that's how it was in that day and age. Sin had not taken effect as much on people's lives. I believe Adam and Eve were perfect, and so when they sinned, they still had that perfect body, but through time we see that degeneration and we see the sin affecting the lives of people. So I believe that there was probably more than just Cain and Abel at this time. Okay, now the focus is just on Cain and Abel. And as we look at this, we find Abel was Cain was someone that worked the ground. He was one that was a gardener by trade. And Abel was a man that took care of the sheep, a keeper of the sheep. He was a shepherd, and he would lead them to the pastures and try to protect or take care of them. I don't think at this point it was really, when you look at the word keeper, it specifically refers to the idea of finding pasture, okay? I believe the sheep didn't have anything to be scared of, okay? I don't think animals were attacking or killing each other at this moment. I don't think that happens till after the flood. And so at this time, he's just leading the sheep to pastures to where they can eat and find grass and things like that, okay? So as they do this, as they have their trades, and let me put this plug in. I don't think there was time for anyone just to sit around and do nothing. Okay? I think Adam and Eve made it to where they were, based off what I see, I think that everyone had a responsibility. Everyone had a job. You could call it a chore, you could call it a job, you could call it whatever you want, but they had something that they were to take care of, and they were to maintain every part of the family. Everyone did. And I think that's another thing that is very important for families, that we all have a responsibility that we bring to the family, and we have a responsibility to do those things, okay? And do it with all of our might, okay? Verse 3 says, and in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground and an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect upon Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect. Okay? Now, Abel, or make sure I don't mess these up. Cain knew, so when you read this, typically this is when the men would take and be responsible for their household, and they would bring their offerings and bring their offerings to the Lord for their household. Okay, this is when the head of the house would have been the high priest. Okay, I believe that's what we're dealing with right now. And so, as they were the high priest, they would bring their offerings to God on however many times they were doing it. I didn't look into that, but they would do this. And so Cain brought his offering of the fruits of his garden and of what he did. Okay, I don't believe that there was anything wrong with the fruits that he brought, and I'll explain that to you here in a few minutes. Okay, so Cain would have brought his offering of the fruits of his garden. Abel brought the fruit, or brought his sacrifice, or it doesn't call it a sacrifice, it calls it an offering. He brought an offering of a sheep to the Lord and presented that to the Lord. Now, I believe, it doesn't say this, but I think because of the pictures we see throughout the rest of the scriptures, it was most likely the firstling, it was without spot and without blemish. Okay? And so I think that because of that picture we can assume that that's what he was doing at this moment. Now, many will say, well, God didn't have respect for Cain's offering because it wasn't the lamb. I don't think that's what it was. I think there was an attitude issue. I think there was a struggle between what he was looking at. And the reason I say that is because of Hebrews 11:4. It tells us this: by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Now, I do believe that the lamb is a perfect sacrifice. The lamb is the right sacrifice. But when you look at what he's doing, he's doing an offering, but it also goes on to say, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Okay? Now, I think there was an attitude issue. I think that there was a struggle where it was about what he could do. Okay? It was about him and his, look at what I've done. There was no trusting in God. There was no faith in God for what he has done. Okay? And Abel brought that sacrifice in the idea of faith and trusting in God, and trust in knowing that what he was doing was to bring a blessing and have an attitude of lifting up Christ. Now, another part of this that I think is vital is because when we look at tithes and offering, we are to bring our gifts, our tithe and our offering. If I just throw my offering into the plate, or in our case, we put it in the box, or we give it to our treasurer, or whatever you do, how do you give that? Are you just going, here's my check, with an attitude of, I got to give my check, another check, another month? Is there really any love in that? Is that really how we treat God's offering? Is that really how we want to give to the Lord? You know, when we start giving to the Lord, and really this shouldn't be just for our offerings and for our tithes, it's anything that we give, okay? We find in 2 Corinthians 9:7, it says, every man according as he has purposeth in his heart. Now, when you look at the verses above this, you know what it's talking about? Sowing and reaping. That which a man soweth, he can reap. He will reap. Okay? So when you think about it from that standpoint, we're talking about sowing and reaping, those things that if we're going to sow, we're going to reap, and as we reap, we're going to give a portion of that to the Lord. And it says in verse 7, it says, every man according as he has purposeth in his heart. Okay? When we give to the Lord, it is between me and God. Okay? And now, between me and God, I need to purpose in my heart that I'm going to give to the Lord because why? Don't you love him? Isn't it his? You know, you think about all of the things, we could probably come down with a whole list of different things as to why we want to give back to the Lord. But let's keep looking at it. He says, let him give. And I want you to catch this. He doesn't specify, he doesn't say, okay, let him give. It's just give. He's not saying if you're giving your offering, if you're giving your tithe. It's if you're going to give anything to the Lord, we need to do it not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver, right? Having the attitude of we want to give back to the Lord, and yeah, I know there are some that do give grudgingly. Oh, I gotta give my tithe. I gotta give my offering this month. You know what? If you're going to look at it from that standpoint, don't give it. You're just doing it out of a grudge, or you're doing it out of guilt or something. And really, it should be done out of because you have cheer for him and you want to serve him. Okay, and you want to be obedient to his will. The other part of this that I want you to catch is that it's not just about your tithe and offering. Don't we have time to give? Don't we have our lives to give? And if we're doing that out of a grudge, if we're doing it out of necessity, if we're not doing it because we love God, we're really not doing it for the right reason. We really want to do, when we start giving to the Lord, we really should want to do it because we want to just give back to God for what he's done for us, okay? The attitude really does matter when it comes to this, okay? I can't stress this enough because I can tell you in my personal experience, there was a time where I was just giving because I knew if I didn't, I was going to get in trouble. That's the wrong reason, right? The other part of that is I gave because I was giving because I felt like it was a good luck charm. That's the wrong reason, okay? Just because you're hoping you get a blessing because you gave that week, I can tell you there's weeks where you're not going to get a blessing, okay? But you still got to give and still do it with the attitude of you want to give back to the Lord what he has given you, because what he has given you is way more than what you're giving back to him, okay? So having that attitude is very important when we start talking about giving. And so I think that is what we see going on when we start looking at Cain and Abel. Because when we start looking at the next portion, it tells us, yes, Cain, and to his offering, we find God had no respect. But what is the very next thing that happens after this? Verse 5, it says, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So what was he? He was angry. He was mad. He was mad at God because he didn't have respect for his offering. Can we say attitude problem? That's exactly what it is. And having that attitude. Now, I think also that if Cain was doing it with the right attitude, he probably would have done a sheep. To be honest, I think he probably would have. But one of the things we do find is later on, God does talk to the children of Israel in Leviticus. You'll find that they start talking, that he says that you are to give of your first fruits. And this is fruit of the yield of your land and different things like that. So they at some point do start doing a offering of the land, of like what Cain did, what Cain did of his garden. So I don't believe it's just about what the offering was. There was some attitude behind it, okay? And so when you look at this, Cain is angry, okay? Now, can you tell when people get angry? How can you tell? Their face, it's all over their face, okay? There's looks that they have, okay? And having when we say we're not angry and we don't tell our face, we're going to have a problem. Because our face reveals a lot, okay? It will reveal when we're sad. It will reveal when we're struggling. It reveals when we're mad. But it also reveals when we're happy, when we have joy, when we're excited. Our face paints a picture of what's going on the inside of our life. Okay? So we want to be careful because Cain, you could tell, was angry. Let's keep going. It says, "And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen?" Cain says, "What are you talking about? Thou doest well," this is still God speaking. It says, "If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him." And Cain talked to Abel, his brother, and it came to pass, okay, let's stop there for a minute. I want to go back to, I want to talk a little bit about verses, did I read 6? Yeah, I did. Okay. So, you think God could tell, God could read our hearts. God knows our hearts. He knows what we're feeling. But do you think at this point he had to really read the heart of Cain? I don't think he did. I think he could see it on his face. I think he could see that Cain was not happy. We could see Cain is upset. And his frustration, not frustration. We already talked about frustration and anger really are the same thing. And he was angry. And where was his anger towards? Was it God? Or was it towards Abel? I would submit it was both. I think it was a little bit of both. I think he was angry at God because he didn't like his offering. Okay? But he was mad at Abel because Abel did it right. And he was jealous. So now we've got anger involved, and now we've got jealousy and pride. Right? All three of those do not make a good combination. It's not a very good salad. Okay? It's very bitter. Okay? And when you combine all of them together, your life is going to be, and you're going to find yourself angry. Okay? And so God calls him out on it and tells him, what are you doing this for? Why are you doing this? So, and I get the feeling when I read this, Cain's kind of just glancing over it, or he may say, all right, and so he's going to go talk to Abel. In verse 8, it talks about how Cain talked with Abel, his brother. Was it about this? Probably. And as he talks to him about this, it looks like Cain doesn't get it right. He gets angrier. And as he gets angrier, it says, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. What did Abel do? Did Abel do anything wrong? No. He's truly innocent in this whole thing. And Cain, because of his anger, because of his jealousy and because of his pride, he decided to act on that, okay? Now, I can tell you, when you start letting those three emotions and when you start letting those three feelings start overtaking your life and start running rampant in your life, you're going to do things that you will regret doing, okay? You will hurt people around you, okay? And as you hurt people, you're going to cause some, let's be honest, it goes back to what Jesus tells us, that if you have anger with your brother, you've already committed murder, okay? So you need to be careful with that, because when you start combining with all these other things, you're going down a path that is not very good for a child of God, okay? And so you want to be careful with that, because Cain acted on emotions, and his emotions led him to sin, okay? It wasn't because of the sacrifice, it was because of his emotions that he sinned, okay? And so remember that our emotions will hurt us faster than anything else, okay? But they will also dictate how you do things if you do not keep them in check, okay? So be aware of that and be cautious of how you handle those things, okay? Anyone have any thoughts or comments? Yes, sir. Yes. I don't know, but I do agree. I think this is the first death. I think this is the first murder. And I think the only way I could see them knowing is through animals, through the sheep, by that. But yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So yes, I do believe it, like what you said. This is the first death or murder or whatever you want to put there. It was the very first one on earth after this time, okay? All right, let's keep going. We're going to run out of time. It says in verse 9, and the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not, am I my brother's keeper? Okay? Do you get a sense of an attitude in there? Okay? You know, it reminds me of when God comes and talks to Adam, or calls out Adam, and he says, where are you? And Adam says, well, I hid from you. And God already knew where he was, okay? God knew exactly where he was, and God knew exactly what was going on, but he needed him to admit it, and he needed him to confess of what was going on, okay? I think the same thing's here. I think the Lord, you know, and that's really what I find it interesting that God does a lot of that causes us to do a lot of self-reflection, okay? He's going to ask us questions to think about what are we doing, why are we doing it, what is the reasoning behind it. He's going to get us to think about what are we doing, okay? So he asks Abel, he says, where's your brother? I don't know. I'm not my brother's keeper. Sounds like a typical brother. Sounds like a sibling that really doesn't want to care about his other sibling. But I think in this case, he's hiding something, okay? And so we find in verse 10, he says, what hast thou done? God already knew what he did, okay? He needed Cain to admit it. It says, the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. Okay? So God knew what Cain had done. God knew exactly what he had committed, that he had committed murder, and he knew that he was doing what he had done. Now, we're going to just kind of read through this fairly quickly, and then we probably will touch on more of this next week. But verse 12, it says, And when thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Okay? You know what? Well, I'll come back and talk about that here in a minute. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him shall kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. Now, I think we all can agree there are consequences that come when with sin, right? Now, some consequences are going to be a little bit more severe. Some are not, okay? Depending on what the sin is, okay? I can tell you if you were to go out and commit to murder today, you're probably going to be arrested and you're probably going to jail, okay, if you get charged. Consequences are severe, okay? What really, when you look at what happened to Cain, was not that bad. But he still had to deal with the consequences from his sin. And we all deal with consequences from the choices that we make, whether good or bad. And when we find ourselves, and if you sin, understand there's going to be consequences from that. It could be big consequences, or it could be not so bad, depending on what it looks like. But you're going to deal with the consequences. Now, when we look at this situation with Cain, Cain's thought was, this is too hard on me. I'm not going to be, people are going to try to kill me. Well, eye for an eye. It's kind of how I look at it. But I want you to think about what the Lord does. He puts a mark on him. Now, there is a lot of debate and a lot of ideas behind what that mark is and what that looks like. I'm not going to give you, you can study that out for yourself. I don't know exactly what that was, but there was something on Cain, a mark on Cain, that people knew not to touch him. Okay? And if they touched him, God was going to take care of it. They were going to see the wrath of God. What that mark looks like really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is that Cain, for the rest of his life, was going to live in turmoil. He was going to be a vagabond. He was going to be living in struggle and hardship, and it was going to be a difficult life from this moment on. Okay? And so he was going to deal with that. And that was his consequences for his sin. I even think at this point, I don't know that he had a very good relationship with his mom, with Adam and Eve anymore, because of the separation, and there was a struggle there. And so next week we'll see a little bit more as to what happens, or we'll see some things that happen. But at this point, Cain's dealing with the consequences from the choice that he made because he let his emotions dictate how he was going to act. So, okay? Any questions, comments, anything anyone would like to add? Okay? All right, next week we'll kind of touch base a little bit more on verses 12 through 16, and then we'll finish up the rest of the chapter next week. So, okay? Any final word or any